At my own wedding reception, my father-in-law leaned over his glass and said, loud enough for half the room to hear, "She's just here for the money." I smiled. It was the kind of smile I'd perfected over the years. Soft, polished, inoffensive. The kind that hid bruises not on the skin, but on the soul. The kind you learn when you're the only one in the room who doesn't belong. And then my husband, Grant Whitmore, the man I'd married hours earlier, laughed. "We all know that," he said, chuckling like it was the most obvious joke in the world. Laughter rippled through his side of the family like a trained reflex. Echoes of mockery and crystal clear surround sound. And just like that, something in my chest sank, not all the way to the floor, just far enough to make breathing feel like work. I stared at my wine glass. I hadn't touched it. A soft swirl of Merlot shimmered in the dim golden lights. My fingers, curled around the stem, remained still. But inside, I was shaking. My stomach twisted. My throat locked with a familiar kind of silence, the kind women learn to carry when they've spent their lives being talked over. It was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Everything looked perfect. The candles flickered like stars trapped in glass. The florals bloomed in ivory and blush. A string quartet played a slowed-down cover of the 2000s love song that once made me cry in college. The kind of wedding Pinterest dreams are made of. But the only thing I could hear now was that laughter. And Grant's silence. I looked at him, my new husband. The man who once told me I made him feel seen. He wasn't even facing me. He was already turned toward his cousin, smirking at some follow-up joke I couldn't hear over the roaring in my ears. I forced myself to breathe. Smile. Keep smiling. Don't cry. Not here. Not in front of them. But my smile felt tight. Brittle. Like it would crack if I moved wrong. My eyes scanned the room. Guests whispered behind napkins. Some gave me apologetic glances. Others didn't bother hiding their smirks. I could feel it, the judgment. The narrative had already been written. She probably married up. Probably saw the Whitmore name and pounced. I knew she looked too polished to be from money. They didn't know. They didn't see the nights I stayed up building my business from scratch in a one-bedroom apartment above a laundromat. They didn't see the meals I skipped to save for the down payment on the house Grant and I now shared. They didn't hear me standing up for Grant when his own father told him he was too soft to run the family business. I didn't marry Grant for money. Hell, I made more than him when we met. But none of that mattered now. Because perception was louder than truth, and tonight, I had been painted gold digger chic. Still, I sat there, smiling. Until a shift happened. A small one, but real. From across the room, I locked eyes with Uncle Ray, my mom's older brother. A retired public school principal with a voice that once made entire gymnasiums fall silent. His brow furrowed. Jaw clenched. He didn't look confused. He looked angry. And then, quietly, calmly, he stood. No theatrics. No raised voice. Just quiet, commanding presence. He tapped the side of his glass with the edge of the butter knife and said, "Would the bride like to say something?" The room froze. Conversations died mid-sentence. The DJ paused, one hand hovering over his laptop. Even the sound of forks and champagne glasses faded. And all eyes turned to me. I blinked. My smile slipped. My fingers tightened around my clutch. My heart began to pound, not from fear, but from something else. Something sharper. Older. No. I thought. They don't get to laugh at me and walk away. And that's when I remembered the envelope. The one I hadn't meant to bring. The one that lived at the bottom of my bag like a secret weapon I swore I'd never need. The deed. My name is Madeline Brooks, 34 years old. Founder of my own marketing firm. First-generation college graduate. Daughter of a high school librarian and a forklift operator. I grew up in a modest two-bedroom home where birthdays were potluck and wrapping paper was reused until it fell apart. I have worked for every dollar I've earned. Nothing, absolutely nothing, was handed to me. Which is why when Grant entered my life 5 years ago, I didn't expect that I'd one day be defending myself at my own wedding. We met at a small business conference. He was confident and polished in a slightly disheveled, Ivy League dropout kind of way. The kind of man who didn't have to be charming, but was anyway. I was overtired, overcaffeinated, and trying to keep a one-woman agency alive out of a second-floor studio that shared a wall with a daycare. Still, there was something about him. The way he asked questions. The way he listened. The way he said my name like it was a new language he wanted to learn. We fell fast. Maybe too fast. But when you've spent your whole adult life in survival mode, patient love feels like a luxury. And I told myself, I deserved it. Grant came from a world I only knew through movies. The Whitmores were old money. The kind that didn't flaunt, but assumed. Their house had a wine cellar. Their dog had a trainer. They used summer as a verb. They weren't rude. Not at first. Just distant. Formal. Cold. The first time I met Charles Whitmore, Grant's father, he looked me up and down, shook my hand like I was trying to sell him a timeshare, and said, "So. Marketing. Interesting." That was it. I tried. God, I tried. I brought wine to dinners. I offered help in the kitchen. I laughed at stories I'd heard 6 times. Grant always told me not to take it personally. They're just protective, he said. They'll come around. But they never really did. When we got engaged, I thought maybe things would change. They didn't. We planned the wedding ourselves. I insisted on it. I didn't want their money. I didn't want their opinions. I just wanted one day, one perfect day, that belonged to us. And I paid for most of it. Partly because I could. And partly because I didn't want anyone thinking I was there for the Whitmore checkbook. Grant didn't argue. But he didn't offer to split it either. And in that moment, I didn't think much of it. Now, standing in that reception room filled with laughter I didn't turn and silence I didn't deserve, I realized maybe I had been naive. Because what Grant didn't say tonight spoke louder than anything his father had. And thanks to Uncle Ray, I was about to say something. I didn't remember standing up. It just happened. Like my body knew something before my mind caught up. I rose to my feet, clutching my small pearl clutch with fingers that trembled, not from fear, but from the sheer restraint it took not to flip a table on the way to the microphone. The room had fallen into a strange, reverent hush. Not curious. Not concerned. Something else. Anticipatory. Like the bride had broken character. Like I had just walked out of the role they expected me to play, the quiet, smiling woman lucky to marry into a name like Whitmore. Their stares trailed behind me as I walked, step by step, toward the front of the room. My heels echoed softly across the marble floor. The kind of click that normally signals grace. But tonight, it sounded like warning shots. Uncle Ray gave me a subtle nod as I passed. He didn't smile. Didn't speak. Just gave me permission. Or maybe he reminded me that I never needed it in the first place. I reached the microphone and adjusted it gently. Deep breath. The string quartet had stopped playing, the guests had stopped chewing, even the servers were still. All of them waiting to see if the bride was going to cry or combust. But I did neither. Instead, I began the way I was taught to speak when you want to be heard. Slow. Clear. Deliberate. "Thank you all," I said. "For being here tonight to celebrate with us." A few people exhaled visibly. One woman smiled with relief. Maybe they thought I was going to laugh it off. Say something gracious. Move along. But I wasn't here to be gracious. I was here to be honest. I reached into my clutch and pulled out the envelope. It was just a simple cream rectangle. But in my hand, it felt like armor. Like truth wrapped in 20 pounds cardstock. "This," I said, holding it up, "is the deed to the house Grant and I live in." A ripple of murmurs. When we bought that house last year, we were in a tight spot financially. Grant's credit wasn't in a place where the bank would approve him. Mine was. I opened the envelope, slowly, like unveiling a secret. I paid the down payment. I signed the loan. I signed the papers. The house is in my name. And not because I didn't trust him. But because I believed in us. Now the silence was heavier. Thicker. Even Grant had gone still. I didn't look at him yet. I wasn't ready. "I didn't marry into money," I said. "I built mine. I've worked since I was 15. I started my own firm from scratch. I paid my own tuition. I helped my parents pay off their mortgage. And I paid for this wedding, every flower, every candle, every fork, because I never wanted to owe anyone an explanation for being here." I looked at Charles Whitmore then. Dead in the eyes. "So when you say I'm just here for the money," I said calmly, "you're not insulting me. You're exposing yourself. Because you never saw me as an equal. Only as an outsider." The gasp was almost theatrical. But I didn't flinch. I folded the deed and placed it back in the envelope. Then I laid it gently on the table next to the mic. "So let's clear this up tonight. I didn't marry for money. I didn't come here with empty hands. I came here with something most people in this room will never understand: resilience." And then I stepped away. No mic drop. No storming out. No tears. Just a walk back to my seat, measured, controlled. Like every step was a quiet revolution. And as I sat down, I noticed something. No one was laughing anymore. I finally looked at Grant. He hadn't touched his drink. The amber liquid in his glass had long since gone warm. His jaw was tight. His lips a flat line. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring at his father. And for the first time that night, I saw it. Shame. Not mine. His. The smirk that Charles wore like a family heirloom had disappeared. In its place, something colder. Rigid. Like he'd just been slapped with a truth he wasn't ready to hear. Good. I didn't feel triumphant. I wasn't even angry anymore. I just felt done. Uncle Ray leaned in and whispered, "Damn proud of you, kid." And I smiled. A real one. Not polite. Not rehearsed. Earned. The music started again. Tentative at first. Like the string quartet was waiting for the okay to exist again. A few guests returned to their seats. Some avoided eye contact altogether. But others, especially women, approached me quietly. One woman from Grant's extended family touched my arm gently. "That was incredibly brave," she said. I nodded. I didn't have words for her. Didn't need them. Across the room, Charles pushed back his chair and left the table. No dramatic exit. No explanation. Just a man retreating into a hallway lined with portraits of ancestors who probably would have approved of his behavior. A few minutes later, Grant followed. I didn't get up. I didn't chase. I stayed seated, sipping my wine slowly, soaking in the strange warmth blooming around me, not from confrontation, but from liberation. For so long, I had bent myself to fit their world. I'd spoken softer, smiled wider, played nice when nice wasn't returned. And now? Without yelling. Without a single insult. I had taken back my name, my story, my space. Grant returned 15 minutes later. Alone. He sat beside me, but left a few inches of space between our chairs. The distance between us no longer symbolic, it was real now. He leaned slightly toward me and said, just above a whisper, "I didn't know you brought the deed." "I didn't plan to use it," I replied. He looked at me then. Really looked. And for a second, I saw it. The flicker. Guilt. Maybe even regret. "I shouldn't have laughed," he said. No excuse. No justification. Just those 7 words. I nodded. I didn't say, "It's okay." Because it wasn't. But I appreciated the honesty. And for the first time that night, I didn't feel alone. The rest of the evening passed like weddings do. People danced. Cake was cut. More champagne flowed. The DJ played a 90s throwback that made a few people get up and move like nothing had happened. But something had. Not everyone noticed. But the ones who mattered? They'd never forget it. Because truth has weight. And when it's dropped gently, like a folded piece of paper on a polished table, it lands heavier than a scream ever could. That night, I wasn't just a bride. I was a woman no one in that room would ever overlook again. The day after the wedding, the house was quiet. Not the peaceful kind of quiet. The kind that's heavy. Pregnant with words unsaid. The kind that lingers in the corners, clings to your clothes, settles in your bones. I sat in the kitchen, still in my robe, a cold mug of coffee in front of me. The envelope, the one with the deed, rested on the counter. It wasn't there as a statement now. Just a silent reminder. Of what I'd said. Of what I refused to swallow anymore. Upstairs, I could hear Grant moving around. Drawers opening. Closet doors closing. His footsteps deliberate. Slow. When he finally came down, his eyes were puffy. "Didn't sleep?" I asked quietly. He shook his head. "Not really." I nodded. Didn't say anything else. He poured himself a cup of coffee and leaned against the counter, a few feet away from me. The distance felt more symbolic today. Not angry. Just real. "About yesterday," he started. I looked at him. "You already said it," I replied. "You laughed. You shouldn't have. And you know that." He flinched slightly at the bluntness of it, but didn't argue. "Do you think I meant it?" he asked. "That I believe what they said?" I didn't answer right away. Because the truth was, it didn't matter if he believed it. What mattered was that he didn't stop it. Didn't defend me. Didn't look at me. He just let the moment pass like it was funny instead of cruel. "I think you didn't see me," I said finally. "Not really." That landed. He winced, his shoulders dropping. "That's not fair," he muttered. "Maybe," I said. "But it's honest." He sat across from me, coffee untouched. "I didn't know it would hit you like that," he said. "It was just a stupid joke. A bad one." I panicked. I nodded slowly. "And you defaulted to laughing at me, instead of standing with me." He said nothing. Because what was there to say? Later that week, I started receiving messages. Some from friends. Some from people I barely knew. One woman, an old client, DM'd me on Instagram. "Your speech at the wedding? Wow. I've never seen anyone take back a room like that. I just wanted to say thank you, for reminding me I don't need to be quiet to be loved." Another message read. "I showed your video to my daughter. She's 12. I told her, this is what strength looks like when it wears lipstick." I hadn't realized someone recorded it. Apparently, it had made its way onto social media, quietly, anonymously, but still there. Normally, that would have terrified me. But now? I didn't care. Because this wasn't just about one insult, one moment, or one wedding. It was about all the moments that women like me are expected to smile through. To accept. To let slide. And I wasn't doing that anymore. That weekend, Grant and I didn't talk much. We shared space. Shared meals. But not much else. Until Sunday afternoon, when he finally said it. "Do you regret marrying me?" I looked up from the book in my lap. "No," I said honestly. "I regret not requiring more from you sooner." He swallowed. "I'm not like my dad," he said, almost defensively. "No," I agreed. "But you've spent your life making excuses for him. And sometimes silence is complicity." That hit harder than he expected. "He's always been hard," he mumbled. "I've never wanted to be like him." "Then why did you laugh like him?" He looked down. That was the first moment I saw something break, not between us, but in him. A crack in the identity he had spent years building as the good son. The peacekeeper. The quiet one who doesn't ruffle feathers. But the truth was, in that silence, he had become a reflection of everything he claimed not to be. A week after the wedding, Charles still hadn't reached out. Not a call. Not a text. Nothing. Grant had gone to see him once, said it was brief and awkward. Said his father dismissed the entire thing as melodramatic. That he told Grant, she made a spectacle. That's on her. I didn't even flinch at that. I had stopped expecting apologies from men like Charles a long time ago. But Grant came back from that meeting. Different. Quieter. He didn't defend his father. Not this time. Instead, he sat on the edge of our bed that night and said, "You were right. He doesn't see you. And he doesn't see me either. Not really." I turned to him. "So what now?" I asked. He exhaled. Long. Heavy. "I don't know," he said. "But I think it starts with me seeing you. And not just seeing. Respecting. Protecting. Showing up." For the first time, I believed him. I won't lie. It didn't magically fix everything. There were still hard conversations. Still tension. Still nights we went to bed facing opposite directions. But there was also something else now, awareness. He started noticing things. When people made subtle comments about my work, he stepped in. When his aunt made a snide remark about me playing alpha, he called it out. When his father invited him to a family foundation dinner and left my name off the RSVP, Grant told him we wouldn't be attending. It wasn't performative. It was progress. 2 months later, Grant came home with a box. It was small. Velvet. Navy blue. "I know we already have rings," he said, handing it to me, "but this isn't that." Inside was a gold chain. A delicate pendant, engraved with 3 words. "I see you." I cried. Not because it was jewelry. But because for once, the gesture wasn't about making things pretty. It was about making things right. Sometimes, I still think about that moment. Standing at the mic. Holding the deed. Looking out at a room full of people who had already decided who I was before I said a word. It could have broken me. But instead, it became the moment that remade me. We still live in that house. My name is still on the deed. But now, when I look at that envelope, I don't see proof. Or protection. Or pride. I see a woman who once believed she had to work twice as hard to earn half as much respect, and then realized she didn't have to earn anything from people who refused to see her worth in the first place. And I see a man, flawed, learning, still growing, who finally decided to stop being quiet when it mattered most. The air in the house was lighter now. Not because everything had been resolved with a speech and a pendant. Not because we'd tied a neat little bow around all of the hurt. But because, for the first time, it felt like I wasn't carrying it all alone. It had been almost 4 months since our wedding. The laughter, the insult, the silence, the speech. Some days it felt like it had happened a lifetime ago. Other days, I could still feel the sharp edges of it, like a memory with corners that hadn't quite softened. But something inside me had shifted. I no longer second-guessed my space in rooms. I no longer rehearsed the perfect smile to hide discomfort. And most importantly, I no longer waited for Grant to choose me when the moment asked him to. Because I had chosen myself. And that changed everything. Charles never reached out. Not a text. Not an apology. Not even a passive-aggressive holiday card. And strangely, that didn't sting the way I thought it would. There was a time I would have bent over backwards to get his approval. To be accepted. To be seen. But now? His absence felt like peace. Some silences are gifts, after all. And besides, I had other voices in my life now. Ones that didn't come with conditions. One Sunday morning, I was in the backyard planting lavender, something I'd always wanted but never made time for, when Noah, my younger cousin, stopped by. He was 17, sharp-eyed, and full of that quiet kind of rebellion that reminded me of myself at that age. He handed me a coffee from my favorite local cafe and said, "Can I ask you something?" I nodded. He hesitated, then asked, "How did you know it was okay to say something? At the wedding, I mean." I smiled. I didn't. He looked confused. "I didn't know it was okay," I said. "I just knew I couldn't not say it. And sometimes, that's all the clarity you need." He thought about that. Then nodded slowly. "I showed your speech to someone at school," he said. "A girl. She'd just been shut down in class for calling out a teacher who made a sexist joke. I sent her the video." My hands paused in the soil. "Did it help?" I asked. He grinned. "She spoke up again the next day. That moment made everything worth it." A few weeks later, Grant and I hosted our first dinner party since the wedding. Small. Intimate. Just people who knew us, liked us, and respected us. There was laughter, the good kind. The kind that bubbles up from inside, not at someone's expense. The kind that builds bridges instead of tearing them down. At one point, a guest jokingly teased Grant about marrying up. Grant paused, raised his glass, and said, "Best decision I ever made." No wink. No chuckle. Just truth. I caught his eye. And in that quiet exchange, I felt it. We weren't erasing the past. But we were building something stronger in its place. Sometimes, Grant would still get quiet when I talked about my business. Not because he didn't support me. But because he was learning how to reframe support. He was used to helping women in ways that felt like rescuing. And I didn't need rescuing. I needed partnership. One evening, I caught him reading a book on women in leadership. He didn't say anything when I walked in. Just looked up and said, "I didn't realize how much I've been taught to expect women to shrink." I didn't respond. Didn't need to. Growth doesn't always need applause. Sometimes, it just needs space. By spring, the video of my wedding speech had gone semi-viral. Over 100,000 views. Dozens of blog reposts. One small women's magazine even reached out for a feature. They asked if I'd be willing to write something, an op-ed about speaking up, being underestimated, and finding power in calm. I stayed up until 2 a.m. writing it. The title? The quietest thing I ever said. It wasn't a manifesto. It was a love letter. To every woman who had smiled through disrespect. Who had sat at tables built for men who saw them as decoration. Who had wanted to scream, but instead chose to speak. The article ended with one line. "You don't have to raise your voice to reclaim your place. Sometimes, the quietest truth is the loudest thing in the room." One evening, after dinner, Grant and I sat on the floor in the living room, wine glasses half full, jazz humming from the record player. "I've been thinking," he said, "about legacy." I raised an eyebrow. Heavy topic for a Thursday. He laughed. "I mean it. Not just what we leave behind. But what we normalize. What we repeat." I nodded. "That's what legacy is." He looked at me. "I want ours to be different." "So do I." Silence settled between us, but this time, it was soft. Not heavy. Not unresolved. Just honest. "I want our kids," he said slowly, "if we ever have them, to see love and power living in the same room. Not competing. Just existing. I leaned my head on his shoulder. They will, I said. Because we are. We kept the deed in the same envelope. But I no longer needed to touch it for reassurance. It wasn't about ownership anymore. It was about authorship. This was my life. My story. I wasn't auditioning for acceptance. I wasn't trying to fit into a world that had already decided I didn't belong. I was writing my place in it. And for the first time, I didn't feel like a guest at my own table. The last time I saw Charles was at a fundraiser 2 years later. He didn't speak to me. Didn't make eye contact. But I walked past him, shoulders back, head high, in a tailored navy jumpsuit and red lipstick, unapologetically myself. And just as I passed, I heard a woman whisper to her friend, "That's her. That's Madeline Brooks. The one with the speech." The friend replied, "You could feel her words in your chest." That was enough. These days, people sometimes ask me if I'm proud of what I did at the wedding. I don't always know how to answer. Because pride implies that it was an act of bravery. And maybe it was. But to me, it just felt like finally exhaling after years of holding my breath. Like removing a dress that never fit right. Like realizing that love, real love, doesn't require silence, shrinking, or sacrifice. It just requires truth. Now, when I speak at events or mentor young women, I always start with the same story. Not the wedding. Not the speech. But the moment I almost didn't say anything at all. The moment I felt the laughter press against my lungs and tell me, "Sit down, smile, be grateful." The moment I could have chosen silence. And didn't. Because that's when everything changed. Not when I spoke. But when I chose not to stay small. That's what love sounds like now. Not a toast. Not a speech. But a woman finally standing where she belongs, and not asking anyone for permission to be there.